I'm Walter McCready, though most people call me Walt. The story I am sharing with you happened in May 1991, somewhere deep in Virginia's Appalachian wilderness, on a stretch of trail that had once promised freedom, escape, and the clean air of high ridges. I had no idea it would instead deliver terror so sharp and consuming that it would follow me for decades. I wasn't alone on that trip. My companion was Eleanor Harper, brilliant woman in her late 20s. We'd taken the trail together with purpose, a long hike from Georgia to Maine. A through hike meant to raise awareness and funding for the youth programs we'd devoted our lives to. We'd been on the trail for nearly 3 weeks when we hit the Virginia section. May was spring on edge temperatures, swinging from freezing nights to humid afternoons that drenched you in sweat. We reached the Wapiti shelter. Fatigue had sunk into my bones so deep I thought it might never leave. Nellie, ever the optimist, had fallen into that comfortable rhythm with me that long-distance hiking creates or destroys. We had chosen the former. We laughed about blisters, helped each other patch them, joked about the absurdity of trying to reach Maine by foot with only the contents of our backpacks. We finally crested the ridge and spotted the shelter's wooden frame through the trees. But there was someone there already. A man sat cross-legged on the platform, gear sprawled around him. Middle-aged, weathered face, clothes that had seen countless miles and weeks of rough travel. He didn't greet us, didn't offer the polite trail pleasantries, didn't even glance at Nellie. He just watched. Nellie didn't notice. Or perhaps she chose not to. Exhaustion had her preoccupied with dinner, with tents, with the small comforts that made the trail bearable. I moved to help, but every movement I made, my attention returned to him. Hours passed, and the chill settled over the forest. I lit a small fire in the pit before the shelter. It wasn't much, but the warmth and light were a comfort or at least a distraction. Then he spoke. "Where are you headed?" I swallowed. "Maine. We're raising funds for youth programs." He nodded slowly, then, after a silence that made my chest tighten, he turned to Nellie. "And you? How old are you? Where are you from?" Something unexplainable flared in me. I moved closer to her. The conversation faded as quickly as it had started, and we retreated into our routine dinner. Minimal conversation, the clinking of freeze-dried meals. I'd just secured the food bags when he stood. He moved to the edge of the platform, then slowly turned back to us. And that's when I saw the predator's face. The movement was sudden after that. I barely had time to process before his hand plunged into his pack and emerged holding a hunting knife. He advanced toward Nellie with anger. I shouted. I lunged. My hands caught his wrist as the knife arced downward. We collided, rolling from the platform onto the hard, rocky ground. My heart pounded. He was strong, practiced, efficient. My hands shook. My arms screamed, but I had to keep the blade away from me, from Nellie. Behind me, her scream tore through the woods. Pure, raw terror, as if it had hit my own chest. Then pain exploded across my ribs. A knee drove into my side, stealing the remaining strength from my arms, and the blade slashed across my shoulder. I rolled, clutching the wound, trying to gather the little strength I had left. I watched him move toward her. My legs refused to stand. Crawling became the only option. My fingers clawed the forest floor as I followed her screams, deeper into the darkness, and then dash silence. It was worse than any sound I had heard before. I called her name, then I hit the stream. Cold water on my hands, on my face. I drank deeply, willing it to wash the fear from me. My legs, numb and unsteady, finally let me rise. I stumbled, gripping trees like they were the only anchors in a world that had gone mad. Hours of crawling, of bleeding, of terror. And when it finally came, I collapsed on a stretch of trail I didn't recognize. An hour later, hikers found me. barely conscious, covered in blood, muttering fragments of what had happened. The authorities found Nellie later mid-morning, half a mile from the shelter. Multiple stab wounds. She'd fought, of course, she had, but it hadn't mattered. She was gone. The man was never caught. Weeks later, his abandoned camp was found in North Carolina. Possessions from multiple hikers left behind. Reminders of victims who may never have been reported. The wilderness had swallowed him. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital. Physical wounds healed, leaving a long scar across my shoulder. I never returned to the trail. I cannot look at photos of the mountains without my chest tightening. The years passed. I married, had children, tried to live normally. But some nights, when sleep refuses to come, I wonder, endlessly, why I survived, and replay of her screams every night. The Appalachian Trail is still there, drawing thousands every year. Most return with nothing, and some never return at all. I was visiting my cousin up in White Mountain. We've always been close. He's lived out there for years, right on the edge of the forest. I'd been there dozens of times before, enough to know the trails, enough to trust or think I could trust the land. But that night, all of that familiarity betrayed me. We usually ran in the mornings, sticking to our routine no matter what. But that day his parents came over, so we pushed our run back. By the time we finally hit the trails, it was already late, well past 11:30 at night. The moon was barely there, hidden behind thick clouds, and our cheap headlamps barely see through the darkness in front of us. We jogged in silence at first. My cousin keeps to himself when he runs, and I usually do the same, but nothing out of the ordinary, until we heard footsteps, soft at first, then persistent, behind us. I froze, heart hammering. My cousin glanced back, squinting into the shadows. Nothing, just the trail stretching out behind us, empty. We picked up the pace, trying to shake it off, but the footsteps followed, perfectly matching ours. Fastening our headlamps higher, I tried to pierce the darkness, but all we could see was black. Pure, oppressive black dot. My cousin cursed under his breath and stopped dead. "If someone's out there," he shouted, voice between the trees, "show yourself." Silence. Nothing moved. I could hear my own heart in my ears, the blood pumping so loud. He turned back to me, eyes dark and sharp, and muttered, "Shortcut." "We're taking the shortcut." I didn't ask questions. He'd warned me before, there are places in these woods you don't tread at night. Some neighbors had gone missing. The shortcut was narrow, almost swallowed by the forest itself. Branches scratched at our arms and faces. Then we saw, between 2 trees, strung up with rotting ropes, was a swing. This one was handmade thick rope, torn fabric, old and stained. My stomach turned, dark red stains. My mind screamed blood. Underneath, more ropes were coiled, some with the same staining. Leaning against a tree was an axe, cleanly propped upright. I made a sound, some mix of shock and horror, and my cousin was instantly behind me, eyes wide, whispering, "Holy hell. What the fuck?" We didn't have time to think. A branch snapped behind us. I turned, and there he was. A man, standing among the trees, his face half hidden by shadows. He walked slowly, deliberately, holding something I couldn't make out. We ran blind, the forest closing around us. We reached the neighbor's house, pounding on the door, but no one answered. The man stood at the edge of the tree line, still, silent, watching. My skin crawled. Finally, we gave up and ran back to my cousin's place. We barricaded every door and window, unable to speak. We sat there, listening, waiting for some sign that he had left, but the forest remained silent. Morning brought no comfort. The swing, the ropes, the axe. I know he's still out there somewhere. I've told this story 100 times in my head. Everyone wants the thrill, the horror. But no one can understand the real fear of knowing the forest hides more than animals. That's the truth I learned in White Mountain, and I'm never going back there. It's been 22 years. Every detail has been etched into my memory. I was 15, my brother Ben was 10, and my little sister Molly had just turned 6. Our parents had gone off to some couples retreat for a few days, leaving us in the care of our grandparents at their remote cabin in the Cranberry Wilderness, West Virginia. The cabin was far from any road that mattered. Route 39 was over an hour away, and the winding gravel path that led to the property cutting through dense forest. The trees pressed in from every side. It was a magical place. We helped our grandfather chop firewood, hiked the narrow trails behind the cabin. At night, we slept in nets to keep the relentless mosquitoes off us. I pretended I was a knight defending a castle. Ben built forts out of blankets, and Molly simply fell asleep to the sounds of the forest. By the third day, the forest began to feel different. Our grandfather checked the windows and brought in the last of the dry wood, while our grandmother fussed with the lanterns. Even at 10 and 6, Ben and Molly noticed a change in their grandparents' demeanor, tension in the way they moved, a sharpness in their eyes. By late afternoon, the storm broke. Rain pelted the cabin, and thunder so violently the floorboards vibrated beneath our feet. Lightning split the sky. I had never seen a storm like it, and even as a child, I felt a fear of the sky's power. We huddled in the living room that night. The power went out, but I lay awake. Around 1 in the morning, thirst drove me to the kitchen. That's when I saw them footprints on the porch. Barefoot, muddied, fresh. Someone had been outside. I froze. The storm raged on, pounding the ground, yet the prints were crisp, unwashed. My heart hammered in my chest. Nobody in our family would have ventured out in this weather. The thought of someone or something lurking outside filled me with a cold, crawling dread. I didn't wake anyone, but I had to see. I had to understand. Then I slipped from my bed and climbed out the window. The storm had scattered the usual chorus of crickets, and Frog's Eye crept to the living room window. Inside, I saw my grandparents. My grandmother sat rigid on the couch, staring toward the door. My grandfather leaned against the far window, shotgun in hand, his eyes wide and unblinking, scanning the black forest. My stomach dropped. They weren't just cautious, they were terrified. Before I could retreat, a sound erupted behind me, too fast for me to even turn. Hands clamped over my mouth, damp and rough, dragging me backward into the forest. My legs kicked, but the grip was unyielding. Panic surged. I screamed internally, the storm muffling any sound I might have made. Get away. I wanted to shout, help, but no voice answered. A gunshot rang out. The roar of the forest and storm swallowed it, but I knew it was my grandfather. Somewhere he was firing into the darkness. And then a scream. Not human, or at least, not fully human. Something warped, primal, ripping through the night. I was dragged over roots, mud, and broken branches. Pain lanced through my left arm as I hit the ground hard. Something loomed over me, a shadow among shadows, and then it was gone, leaping into the thick trees, faster than any human could move. My grandmother grabbed me, pulling me toward the cabin, tears streaking her face. My grandfather ran after whatever had taken me into the endless darkness. Shotgun in hand, that was the last I ever saw of him. We stumbled back into the cabin. My arm throbbed painfully. My grandmother hugged me so tightly. By dawn, my parents arrived, worried and bewildered. I was taken to the hospital, broken arm, cuts, bruises, and a heart still hammering from the terror of the night. Search teams combed the forest for a week. Volunteers, trackers, even police. Nothing, not a footprint, not a clue, not a sign of my grandfather or the thing that attacked me. Weeks turned into months. The questions never stopped. My parents pressed for answers. My grandmother, haunted and broken, offered none. She never recovered from that night either. Less than a year later, she died of a heart attack, leaving me and my siblings alone with the memories and the silence of the woods. Even now, I replay the night over and over the storm. The footprints, I blame myself, foolish, reckless. Driven by curiosity I should have left buried in my childhood innocence. Ben and Molly sometimes ask questions about that summer, about Grandpa. I never give them answers, because I have none. I've never been back to that cabin, never will. I was 19 in that summers. I'd grown up on these slopes, wandering with friends who were more like siblings. But that summer, I became obsessed with something entirely different. I had found a dusty old geology book at a thrift store, and it spoke of these hidden underground world's chambers, carved by water over millions of years. Tunnels through the mountains, untouched and unseen by nearly anyone. The thought gnawed at me. I talked my friends into going with me. Adventure always found us, and we never seemed to care about the danger. We left in the late morning, backpacks light, carrying only sleeping bags, a few flashlights, and some old ropes that belonged to one of their older brothers. The forest greeted us like a familiar yet distant relative. The first 2 caves we explored were relatively bin and tight, damp, cool. I remember laughing with them as we slipped and slid over slick stone, taking turns pretending we were legendary explorers uncovering lost worlds. But those were mere appetizers. The real course waited further in, tucked behind a slope of thick pine where shadows clung to every boulder. I warned them, of course. This one might be unstable, I said, voice tight with excitement and a tremor I tried to hide, marked with an X on the map. Probably for a reason, but they only grinned, eyes alight with youthful arrogance. Danger was a challenge, and we were invincible. The entrance was nothing more than a narrow crack between 2 massive boulders. Cold air seeped out of it, sharp and metallic, crawling along my arms like tiny fingers. I tied the rope around a tree, the fibers rough against my palms, and we began our descent into the unknown. The passageway widened enough to move without crouching. It ran straight, maybe 100 feet, before turning sharply to the left. And that's when I saw symbols deep into the rock. Circles bisected by jagged lines, triangles covered in scratches, shapes that made no sense to me at all. I froze. My friends noticed it too. Our breathing became loud and uneven. The air seemed thicker, almost viscous, clinging to our skin and filling our lungs with a damp, earthy tang. "Does anyone know what that means?" one whispered, though I couldn't tell who. "Don't think it's meant for us," I said. And in that instant, I realized we were intruders in a place that wasn't meant to be explored. The tunnel opened into a small chamber, the floor slick and dark with something that clung to our boots. A blend of decay and sweetness, so overwhelming that I gagged before I could stop it. One of them turned, pale-faced, retching against the wall, at the far wall. An upside-down wooden cross had been nailed to the rock. I stepped closer, light from my flashlight shaking, to read the scratched words carved across it. I never made it. From the far corner, deep in shadows, came a sound, a scraping, a high-pitched, followed by movement too fast to track. Before I could react, something lunged at one of our group. He screamed, a sound that tore through the cavern. I grabbed the cross, yanking it from the wall, and swung with everything I had. The creature recoiled, letting him slip free, but more were emerging. Dozens, perhaps, hunched and pale, moving with grotesque precision. Their forms were partially obscured by shadows. We ran. The rope we'd tied became our lifeline, a thread of hope through the oppressive blackness. My heart slammed against my ribs, my lungs burned. Each turn revealed more of their grotesque shapes. slithering over rocks, dragging limbs across the ground. Then, I realized he was gone. Tommy, my friends noticed almost immediately. We called his name, our voices bouncing off the walls. My stomach twisted. Panic clawed at me, but there was no time to dwell. We burst into daylight, trembling, mud-streaked, barely holding our flashlights. Michael clutched the rope, breathing hard, while the others pressed close together, eyes wide and unblinking. We stared at the black slit of rock that had been the cave entrance. It seemed to pulse, alive. The sound of scratching, shuffling, wet dragging noises came from within. Not human, not animal, just something ancient and angry. We didn't move until the last rays of sun had dipped behind the ridges. And then the rope shifted, pulled by some unseen force from within. My stomach sank. Whatever had taken him had not been gentle. We spent the night hiding, crouched behind the nearest pines, too scared to speak. But no matter how long we waited, we couldn't stop thinking about Tommy, still somewhere in that darkness, still trapped in that nightmare. We made our way down the mountain to the ranger station. Our appearance alone, bloodied, scratched, exhausted, was enough to unsettle the staff. We told them Tommy's disappearance. They looked at us as though we had lost our minds. I wanted to shake them and make them understand, but the words died in my throat. A rescue team went in. Hours later, they returned, but with something almost as shocking. Tommy was alive. No explanation for where he had been or how he survived. He was catatonic, eyes wide and unblinking, repeating fragments of screams and shadows that didn't belong in this world. I'll never forget that moment. Relief and terror mingled. I could barely breathe. The months that followed did nothing to quiet the memory. I stayed away from the caves, avoided the woods whenever possible. My friends drifted apart. Tommy received help, though I suspect no one truly understands what he saw.